Hello and welcome to another 3D Thursday. This week I am using Microsoft 3D Builder to make myself a little pen pot to store some pens and little pieces of card in, artist trading cards. So I've started a new scene and loaded in a rectangle and also a cylinder. And I'm just changing their dimensions with the aspect ratio lock off so that I can change them independently. These dimensions I have already measured, by the way, based on pens that I'm using and also the pieces of cardstock that I want to store. I also loaded in there a cone, and that's going to help me get a stable base on my pen pot. I'm just going to move the cone out of the way for now, as I don't need it just at the moment. And I'm duplicating the rectangle, or the rectangle, because I want to use it as a positioning guide. If I move the pen cap clip representation, I need something to butt it up against because I don't want anything poking out of the back of that section. And this means that I can butt it up against it and then change the width of it so that it can sit inside that cylinder. What I'll then do is turn the sticky selection on and group these two pieces together. This is now basically a representation of my pen cap because it's going to sit upside down in the pen pot. So I'm going to use this to punch the hole later. Now I did merge them as well, and I've just recolored them as well so they stand out in the design. Because I've changed various aspects, including the height, I did just do the settle function there. And also I'm duplicating it as well. I know that I'm going to need 6 of these. So basically 3D Builder will duplicate everything that you've got selected. I'm dragging them out to the point that they're locking in place against each other. And then I'm going to manually add an extra 2 millimeters to this. So that I've got as an exact spacing between them. Then what I'm going to do is select the other 4 and do the same but horizontally along the x-axis. I'm holding down the shift key to select multiple items, by the way, in case you weren't sure how I was doing that, but you can obviously turn on the sticky selection if you would prefer to do it that way. To deselect, you can always click anywhere on the workspace, or over on the right you can select deselect all. What I'm doing here is I'm just using the rotate function to give the pen caps in their display a little bit of designer touch. I don't necessarily want them to sit straight on, so the pen clip is going to be at a 45-degree angle. It's not necessarily a step that you will have to take. I just think it'll look cool in the finished piece. Okay, for the next part, I'm bringing in a cube and I'm going to position it centrally over my pen caps. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm using the resizing options to drop it down so that the pen caps will sit a little bit flush of the actual pen pot. And then I'm dragging that whole cube out a bit. as I did before, I'm dragging it till it locks in place, then adding a couple of millimeters. This one I'm eyeballing. I'm using my X-ray option here so that I can make sure that those pen caps are going to be raised up enough. X-ray option is in the view menu, by the way. So whichever object you click on, it basically gives you a translucent effect on the rest of them. So I can see roughly that that is sitting higher than the base, which is good. That's what I wanted. But I think I'm going to increase that just a little bit more, just so that I get a more solid base. And then by clicking, shift clicking the other 5, I can do the same to them in bulk. Turning off the X-ray, just making sure everything looks okay. I think so. So I'm going to bring in the cone. And position that on one corner. I'm duplicating that cone because I want exactly the same dimensions on the next one that will sit on the opposite corner. Okay, looking good so far. Don't forget to left click and drag, or right click and move in order to rotate your workspace. I'm bringing in another cube now. This is going to form the holder for the little pieces of card. Now the card I know are going to be 2.5 inches by 3.5. So I'll need to set this up so that it's exactly the dimensions that I want it to be. So I'm just locking that in place on the back of the pen pot. So having measured and then converted into millimeters, because I'm working in millimeters, you can basically go ahead and change that, or I did anyway. Now I'm duplicating that. And then I'm going to add a little bit to it to form the outer border. I was adding about 1.5 millimeters there. Sorry, 2.5 millimeters. I was just double checking my measurements, making sure that I got those right before I move on. Okay. As before, I'm increasing the height of the hole that I'm going to punch out. Now, if you're finding it difficult at any point to select the relevant piece that you're working on, don't forget over on the side there are all the items individually, and you can recolor each one so they're easier to identify, especially if you're using a lot of cubes. But you can select things that way, especially that's especially helpful if things are inside each other, like you're hollowing out a shape. Now I've selected both of those things so I can move them into place together and lock them on the back of the pen pot. Looking alright to me so far. Now I fancied having a stepped front to my pen pot, so I've duplicated the cube, changed the height, and then settled it so that it's sitting on the floor of the workspace. And then I'm selecting the taller one and dropping that back so that it sits further back in the design. I was resizing rather than moving. Notice I haven't actually punched any of the holes out yet of the shapes that I'm using as holes. That's going to come later. I thought it'd be great to have a slope on here as well, just as a bit of a design feature. So I've brought in a wedge shape and I'm just manipulating that manually or by eye so that I can get a nice sloped front. This is going to be where my pens will sit. I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse, by the way, to zoom in and out. It's a very convenient shortcut. Now that wedge for me doesn't quite do it, so I think I'm going to go back in and work on that a bit more. But initially, or for now, I'm going to bring in another cone, because what I'd like is for there to be almost like a rounded front, like this. By manually typing in the numbers, I get an exact width. And because I know the width of the other pieces, it helps identify the different bits and pieces or get them to the right proportions. Okay, I think I'll stop fiddling with the cones for now. What I'll do though is I will go back in and work on a couple of different areas. What I've done though, just so that I can have a version to go back to without having to do undo, is I grouped everything, selected it all and then grouped it, and then duplicated that whole group. It's just because I know that whatever I do next might not cut it for me. So with the aspect ratio lock off, I'm extending that back rectangle to match the width of the card holder. Yeah, I think that works. What do you reckon? What I decided to do now, what I have decided to do now is create a couple of little holes to the side of the pens to hold pencils. So these have slightly different measurements. So I'm bringing on different cylinders to be the pencil holders, and I'll make two, just in case I want a HB and a 2B, or a different types of lead weights. Yeah, looks good. As I did before, I'm just checking on the vertical height of the cylinders for the pencils to make sure they're off the bottom, because I don't want the hole to go right through the pen pot. I'm using X-ray mode so I can double check. And the same for the other cylinder. Because I know what height I need it at now, I can just quickly type that in and match it. Right, time to sort out that wedge. What are we going to do with this? Right, let's squish it and flatten it. Oh, there we go. I think that may work. I like that. I'm going to duplicate that though and have another raised slope on the pen section at the back. What I'm doing here is just increasing the height randomly of the pen sections that are at the back. I'm not lifting them up, I'm increasing their height because I want the holes to be further up, if that makes sense. And I'm also bringing that wedge shape out to encompass the pencil holes that I created previously. Okay, I think we're good. Looks all right to me. What I need to do now is weld all of the shapes that are going to form the outside body together. So this is all of the cubes, the slopes and the cones. And there we go with the merge. So that's merged those all together. And now I can start subtracting the bits that I don't want. So it's all the pen holes, it's the card slot, and that's now punching all of those holes out. And that's using the subtract function. Remember, to use that, you just select the one object that you want to punch through another and click on subtract. Okay, I'll use the paint tool just to make sure that everything's prim and proper. And there we go, there is my pen pot. Now there is one thing that I forgot to do, and that was, if you've been following this, was take out the 2 extra cones that I brought in that I didn't use. So first of all, I'm getting rid of the other pen pot, I don't need that anymore. I am going to go ahead and save this, but I will come back to more details of that later. But here you will see down the bottom there are some weird colouring patches. Now this is because I forgot to delete these before I merged the other shapes that were on top of them. So all I'm doing is literally selecting them and using the cut function. That's taken those away now.